Another exciting episode of Get Yourself Optimized. This episode I'm super excited about because I have Jeff Goins with us. I've been working really hard to get Jeff onto the show, and now he's finally here. Jeff is a writer, speaker, and entrepreneur. He's the best-selling author of 5 books, including The Art of Work and Real Artists Don't Starve. His award-winning blog, goinswriter.com, is visited by millions of people every year. Through his online courses, events, and coaching programs, he helps thousands of writers succeed every year. Jeff lives with his family just outside of Nashville, where he makes the world's best guacamole. I like guacamole. That's awesome. Thank you for joining us today, Jeff.
Hey, Stephan, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we have to start with your origin story. I know you've said this a million times, but for folks who don't know who you are and how amazing you are and what you're doing in the world, you're doing some amazing stuff. You didn't just wake up one day and just suddenly start authoring best-selling books and changing the world. You somehow ended up in that place. So can you share with us a little story of how that all came to pass?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a writer who helps other writers and creatives succeed. That's probably the most succinct way that I can say it. What I think it looks like is I'm always trying to figure out how things work for me and then sharing what I learn with other people. So my story is that my whole life I was a creative. I was an artist when I was a kid. I won the school spelling bee when I was in 6th grade. That was the only thing I'd ever, beaten anybody at. So I was like, I'll be the word guy now. So I got really into writing. My dad taught me how to play guitar. So I took these sad poems about girls that wouldn't go out with me, and I turned them into sad songs about girls that wouldn't go out with me. I acted in plays. I did all these different things, and never really thought that I could be an artist for a living, that I could never be a writer or somebody who made things and shared them with the world and actually got paid to do that. I graduated college and I ended up touring the country with a band playing music. And to keep the costs of that experience low, when we would go play shows in different towns, we would stay with families. We'd sleep on their couches or whatever. We'd stay in anything from mansions to trailers. And pretty much everywhere that we went, people would say, it's a good thing that you're doing this now, because when you get older, you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to play music for a living. And I thought, yeah, you're right. It's a good thing that I'm doing this young, because later on I'll have to get a real job. I agreed with them that you couldn't make a living as an artist, as a creative professional. And so I went and got a job after that year with a nonprofit organization, became a marketing director. I didn't know anything about marketing. I just knew how to write. I was hired as a copywriter. I started reading Seth Godin, which was a pretty good crash course in marketing, and eventually became the marketing director of this nonprofit organization. And we worked with individuals and organizations and did relief and development work in the developing world. And I did that for 7 years, telling other people's stories, raising money for the organization, kind of spreading the mission of what we're about. And along the way, I realized I had a story that I wanted to tell about myself. I wanted to start writing again and get back into that. And so I really struggled with this. I started writing. I started a blog, but I didn't think you could make any money doing that. I didn't think you could be a full-time writer. So it was just a hobby. And it was around this time that I had a conversation with a friend where he asked me what my dream was. And I said that I didn't know. I said, yeah, I don't think I have one of those. And he said, really? He goes, because I would have guessed that your dream was to be a writer. And as soon as he said that, I felt it kind of hit me. And I said, yeah, I'd like to do that someday, but that'll never happen. And he just looked at me and he said, Jeff, you don't have to want to be a writer. You are a writer. You just need to write, right? I was like, all right, fine. And that word from a friend unlocked something in me that was already there, but I kind of needed somebody to remind me of it. And so after that moment, I started writing every day on a blog. I got up at 5 a.m. and just started writing a 500-word article and publishing it every single morning. And I did this for a year. And when people asked me what I did, immediately after that conversation, I said, I'm a writer. And guess what happens when you go around calling yourself a writer? The next question that people tend to ask you is, well, what do you write? What are you writing? And so this for me was a way of sort of forcing my hand into the kind of vocation, into the kind of work that I knew that I needed to be doing but was afraid to do. And I don't think of this as necessarily faking it till you make it as much as believing it until you become it. And so I was constantly sort of putting myself out there and then forcing myself to own this title that I was claiming. And within about a year, I got a publishing deal. And within 2 years, I replaced my income, my wife's income, who was getting ready to have our first child. And then we ended up tripling our household income in about 6 months. And it became possible for her to quit her job and become a full-time mom, which was something that she wanted to do. And then I ended up quitting my job. So in a year, I published 2 books. This is 2012. I published 2 books, started a business. My wife quit her job. I quit my job, and we had a baby. And I've been doing, this kind of work ever since, writing books and teaching online courses and programs for writers and creatives.
Yep. And also doing seminars, live seminars or workshops. Have you been doing that too?
Yeah, in-person workshops. Yep. Yeah, mastermind groups.
Yep.
A variety of programs and events and things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said something that really resonated with me. It's not fake it until you make it. It's more like acting as if, or doing the thing that you're called to do, even though you may not be good at it at the beginning, because it will just happen for you. And I think that's an important distinction. Acting as if versus faking it until you make it it's like when you fake it till you make it, you give energy to this concept that you aren't enough, or that you are a pretender.
That's right.
An imposter, right? To use the term imposter as in like imposter syndrome. And I'm curious, did you ever consider yourself an imposter or having potentially imposter syndrome?
Always I felt like a fake. I felt not good enough. And I think that's different from feeling like a fake, maybe. I agree that faking it till you make it is sort of reinforcing this idea that I don't deserve to be here. And I grew up with a lot of shame. I was very overweight as a kid. I've struggled with my weight most of my life, and got really teased early on by kids, peers, friends. And so, that was a hard thing to shake. It's a hard thing to shake even today. So I sort of come onto any scene with the assumption that I don't deserve to be here, that I'm not good enough, and I've got to fight that back. So I didn't need any more of that energy, as you said. And so writing was something that I'd always done. It was always something that came naturally to me. And so I began to wonder, what if I already am this thing that I'd like to be? And now it's just a question of really growing into it, fully becoming it. And I do think that there's a difference between truly feeling like a fake and simply feeling not good enough right now. And I like the way Ira Glass talks about this in what some have called the taste-talent gap. I believe it was Ryan Holiday who sort of codified it with that title, taste-talent gap, which is to say, I'm not good enough yet, which Ira Glass sort of inverts and says, what that means is that you've got really good taste, right? And when you start out in any kind of profession and the work that you do is not as good as you would like, that means you just have really good taste, and your talent hasn't yet caught up to your taste. And that's normal and natural. That's different than being a fake. That just means that it's not good enough for you yet. Well, great. You have a goal. You have something to grow into, but it doesn't mean you don't deserve a seat at the table.
Do you think this it complements or kind of runs counter to the concept of having a unique ability that you would use, let's say, some sort of assessment to determine what that is? Like, I'm going through Dan Sullivan's strategic coach program right now and learning about what he calls unique ability. And there's a whole process that you go through to identify what that unique ability is. And then the idea then is to focus on that unique ability and spend 80+% of your time in your unique ability and just drop everything else. Delegate, delete, defer anything else that's not in your unique ability.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ancients, the Greeks, called that genius, right? And the transcendentalists, people like Emerson and Thoreau, sort of resurrected this idea that there is a hidden force inside of you, your genius, your unique ability. It is the thing that only you do the way that you do it. So I do agree with that insofar as I understand it. I do think that zone of genius is ever expanding, and that we in many ways are a mystery to ourselves. And any time that we go, this is the thing that I do, and this is the thing that I'm best at, that's the voice of ego. And ego is always talking about the past. It's always talking about the things that you've done, and ego is often afraid of the future, and it's sort of trying to bank on the achievements of the past. It's not the voice of possibility, right? Genius in many ways is always about possibility and what could be. And if you think about your dreams and goals, the things that are often most exciting are not the things that you've done or even the things that you think you're capable of doing right now, but it's the question, what could I do if I could do anything, right? That's always what seems to excite us, and I think there's a reason for that. And so I do like the idea that our whole life is really an effort to discover what our life's work is, what our calling is. And in some ways it's a mystery until the very end when we look back and we see how all the dots are connected and we go, oh, that's the picture that I was painting. That's the mosaic that I was creating with my life. And you think about even some of the great master artists, inventors, entrepreneurs, great creators throughout history. One creation led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. A great example of this is Michelangelo was a sculptor, and he was like, I'm going to be the world's best sculptor. Right. And then he got into a painting contest with Leonardo da Vinci, kind of against his will. He got goaded into it, and he was kind of a prideful man. And he's like, I have to defend my honor. And Leonardo da Vinci said, painting is better than sculpture. And Michelangelo's like, how dare you? Sculpting is the finer art. So they got into this painting war, and Leonardo beats him. Right? The public votes on it, and Leonardo beats him, and he gets this commission. They're sort of gunning for a commission. But Michelangelo's mural, he does this public mural in Florence, was good. And so now he's known as a painter, this thing that he didn't want to do and be known as. And next thing he knows, the Pope calls on him and says, I need you to paint a ceiling for me, which becomes the Sistine Chapel. So imagine what would have happened if Michelangelo simply said, no, I don't paint, right? We wouldn't have this thing called the Sistine Chapel. So I think we have to be very careful that in these assessments and searches for significance that they help guide us, they clarify the inner voice, the calling inside of us that says, this is who I am, this is what I'm here to do. And my guess is if you took that assessment and you're like, this is not me, it wouldn't hold the same weight as you take the assessment and you go, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So there is some sort of inner resonance that happens. And so I do believe that you are always the one. You're always the one who's saying what's true for you. You're always the one who's getting to decide, this is who I am. And I think so long as we don't ever try to camp out on a single identity or achievement, we keep growing, evolving, changing, becoming who we're so supposed to be. Like, to me, that seems to be what it's all about.
Yeah. All great statements and ideas. I'm curious if there are assessments that have been particularly impactful for you. Like, for example, StrengthsFinder for me was very valuable. Myers-Briggs, not so much. I did get a lot of value also from the from Sally Hogshead's Fascinate assessment. And so those are just some examples of some assessments. I've done a bunch, and there's a bunch on my to-do list to do, like print I'm going to do. I'm going to also do Colby. Heard really good things about the Colby assessment. So I'm just curious, what are your favorites?
There was a time where I was like addicted to these things. Like, I was searching for someone or something to tell me who I was, so I could just be that. I did that to a fault, to the point that I remember this was, one of the ways that I kind of grew my influence was by asking influencers what I should do and then go doing that. And they would go, look at that guy doing that thing. And they would promote it or praise it or whatever. And I remember in 2015, I just had this best-selling book come out. I was sort of top of my game, making the most money, doing the most things, like everything was going great. And I didn't know what to do next. And I had gotten to the point simply by outsourcing inspiration, asking other people what I should do. And so I asked this influencer, this friend of mine, this mentor type, best-selling author, very successful entrepreneur leading this huge online community. And I said, hey, what should my next book be about? What do you think? I've done this. Now what should I do next? And this was how I had sort of endeared myself to influential people, like playing the role of the apprentice, the student, always learning, And he sent me, the response to the email was one sentence: I have no idea, ! That was it. I have no idea. And I was taken aback, and I was a little bit offended by the brashness of it. And then I thought, well, yeah, of course. How could you? How would you know? It's me. It's my life. You have no idea. You're living your life. And why have I been doing this for so long? And it forced me to figure out the direction of my life for me. That said, I still find assessments valuable tools, but I realize that they cannot tell you who you are. They are at best shovels and picks in the archaeological dig of your life where you're uncovering different pieces and aspects of yourself. That said, I like the Enneagram a lot. That's a very popular tool, especially here in the Nashville crowd. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yep. It's based on these nine different numbers. But the people who are really into that are smart friends of mine say, you're not a number, right? All that means is that you are leading from that particular space, right? And it tells you what your strengths are, but also some other areas of your life that you can sort of cultivate. And so I do like the idea that like you should focus on your unique ability, but I also think every zone of genius, if you will, has its shadow side. It has its faults, right? And quirks. And I don't think you should focus on your weakness, but I do think part of the goal of life is to become a whole person. Doesn't mean perfect, doesn't mean boring, but it means whole, right? And and so if there's some broken area of my life that in some ways creates a strength in another area, right? So shame was a big one for me. Shame is a great tool if you put it to use for you and you go, I'm never going to be embarrassed again. So I'm gonna throw myself into the world of achievement, and I'm never going to feel good about where I am, which means I'm always going to be striving, and I'm probably never going to be broke because I'm so terrified of being in a place of need and feeling the weight of that shame again. So shame helped me do some things that some might look at and go, oh, that's success. But there was a lot of anxiety that came with that success. And so the past few years, I've been looking at that and going, how do I make this whole? How do I heal what's broken without necessarily letting go of the good things that have come as a result of this thing? So, Myers-Briggs was good. Enneagram is probably the thing that I pay a lot of attention to these days. There's a very simple, easy test for working with colleagues and coworkers that I like a lot by a guy named Les McEwen called the Synergist Test. Super simple, super easy, but very useful. And he talks about sort of 4 different types of workers. There's the visionary, the processor, and the operator. Similar to kind of the E-Myth, entrepreneur, technician, manager. But basically he says these 3 types of coworkers cannot work well together. The visionary is always going to be blowing things up. The operator is just going to want to get something done, and the processor is going to want to know what the process and the plan is. And so there's a 4th type of person called the synergist, an integrator type, who has to bring these other three types together. That's a helpful test and a really great book about how visionary entrepreneurs are terrible people to work with, usually, unless they become self-aware and get the right people around them and figure out how to work with those people, and usually by hiring some sort of synergist, right? Anybody who starts things should read that book, I think. Anyway,
Okay.
sorry.
So that reminds me of Tony Robbins teaches this thing of you're one of three types of business people. You're either the artist, the entrepreneur, or the manager slash leader. And if you are the artist, you desperately need to have the entrepreneur and the manager leader recruited and part of your team, or you're going to end up potentially going out of business. And similarly, the manager leader without the entrepreneur, without the artist, is lost. And so you need all three. I thought that was pretty insightful.
The term that McEwen uses is visionary arsonist. Visionary arsonist, which I think is an apt moniker. And the idea here is you will always burn the current thing down for the new thing. And that's actually like a terrible way to run a business, right? Like the point when things start working in a business is the point at which the artist, the visionary kind of person is completely and utterly bored and they're not feeling inspired. And so you have to have a manager type who goes, okay, I'm going to run this, and you go launch your next thing, but you don't have to burn this down, So.
Yeah, that reminds me, that's the visionary arsonist idea. Reminds me of Jay Samit, who I've interviewed on this show. He's the author of the book Disrupt You. Like, you have to find the opportunities to disrupt yourself before your competitors do that to you. Yeah,
smart
concept.
Yeah, burn it down.
Now, I'm curious about this idea of making yourself whole and the broken areas in your life, addressing those areas. That idea triggered for me the this concept that I learned in Kabbalah, which is if you could imagine a prism, and on the one end of the prism where the light is coming out, you've got all the colors, and the colors of indigo and red and violet and what have you. If you could imagine that each area of your life is one of those colors, right? You got your intimate relationship with your spouse or partner. You have your career. You have your physical fitness and all this stuff. So a lot of folks are chasing after the different colors, but in reality, those colors are all part of the white light. So the light of the Creator, the light that is just everything, right? So the universe, or however, your higher power, however you want to call it, unless you're atheistic, and then it's just like, all random, whatever. So if you think about chasing after that white light that's going into the prism instead of chasing after all the different colors, because what happens is you chase after one color. Let's say you go after your career and your relationship falls to pieces, or you focus too much on your relationship and you let your career fall apart. So this has been a pivotal concept for me. It's really helped me to keep the bigger picture in mind and to, quote unquote, juggle all these areas of my life in a much more holistic fashion. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, speaking of light always sort of casts a shadow, right? And I think, another way of thinking of that is, we never really see a person's work. We see the success, we see the outcome, and we go, look at that couple walking in the public holding hands, at the park or something with their kids. Like, that's a happy marriage, that's a happy family. I would like to have that. When in reality, you have no idea what's happening between all three of those people. Could be the best or the worst thing, and you have no idea what it took to get to that point. So you are essentially seeing a shadow. And we see this in people's lives all the time. Oh, you drive a Tesla. I would like a Tesla. Well, that's a shadow, right? That's not – you can't – wanting a Tesla in and of itself doesn't get you a Tesla. Doing the work and research and whatever was required and acquiring the Tesla is how you get the Tesla. And so it's a shadow. And so a lot of people do chase after shadows instead of after the light, whatever it is, because in some ways a shadow is easier to see than light, right? Light is kind of everywhere. And it's even harder to identify the source of the light, right? And so it's easy to chase after a shadow until you realize it's not real. It's not a real thing.
Yeah.
Like a shadow is not a thing. It's the shadow of the real thing. And I do think that all of our ambitions in life are really shadows of the one true, desire, which is to be whole, which is to be connected to God, consciousness, life itself. And in some ways that requires, a detachment from everything else that's not a true desire, which, in Eastern mysticism, we would call attachments, illusions, the idea that I want this thing and it's going to make me happy. But, after enough life, you want enough things and realize I'm not necessarily the best predictor of what's going to make me happy. And I just think, sometimes we're chasing after shadows, and we have to acknowledge that when we get the thing that we think we want and it doesn't satisfy us, that there may be something deeper we're longing for. And it's okay if you haven't named that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really profound discussion here. So this idea of the shadow and seeing somebody in their nice new Tesla, getting a little jealous of them, maybe envious, reminds me of this concept of it's evil eye. It's something that I think of as, or I used to think of as superstitious, but now I can see how it's almost like saying a prayer hoping for something negative to happen to the person instead of something positive.
Well,
and
yeah.
So it's like, okay, I could actually see how that might make sense. It's not just, superstition, like a black cat running in front of your path or something. It's like, no, somebody could say a negative prayer about you, just like they could say a positive prayer about you or for you, and both could affect you. So this idea that somebody sees that little thing about you or about your life, your lifestyle, and says, I want that, and that's not fair that I don't have that and they have that. Yeah. That could just be like a negative energy that's being shot your way. And in that regard, I tend not to showcase my amazing life on social media and everything. I feel very blessed, and I get lots of gifts in my life from the Creator, and I don't want to showcase that on social media. So you don't see lots of pictures of like my newborn son, who's now 3 months old.
Oh, congrats!
As we're recording this, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
On my social channels, I just we posted one photo, and that was like several weeks after he was born, and that's been it. It's like crickets. Like lots of cool stuff about my podcast episodes and things, but I just don't get into the keeping up with the Joneses thing on social media, showing off a private jet, or not that I have one, but that sort of stuff is not my game, not my shtick. Yeah. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I do think 100 years from now, what we understand about the quantum field and things that feel very woo-woo, even now, we're going to look back and go, oh, look at how silly and superstitious they were, and how much they didn't even understand how everything was connected. Yeah. Right. And so we think even now we're pretty materialistic in the sense that like material is real, and then there's everything else, and that's like spiritual or non-physical and somehow not real. When in reality, most of the physical universe is invisible, is energy and dark matter. And if you sent your kid to school wearing the new cool Air Jordans or something, and it made other kids jealous, and they tripped him and pushed him down and made fun of him, like there would be no question, that these kids who were jealous or whatever were inflicting physical harm on your child. Like that's very clear. But when somebody wishes ill on somebody or even feels jealousy toward them, which is not a positive emotion, right? We just have no idea what's happening energetically. And I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know, but it could be the equivalent, of tripping a kid as they walk down the aisle, right? You don't know. So I think that's very interesting and laudable, not showcasing that if for no other reason than I don't want to trigger that in other people and I don't want to attract any of that. I agree with that, maybe for slightly different reasons, because I think me sharing my awesome life publicly in a way sort of sickens me. It does something to me that I don't like at a sort of a soul base state level. One of the things it does is it says, look at the shadow. This is me. I'm the shadow. Look at my shadow. Don't you like my silhouette? Isn't it great? And I can start to believe that I'm the shadow. Thomas Merton talks about this. He says we all have two selves. We have the true self and the illusory self, which we might think of as the soul or your consciousness and your ego, right? And the problem with having a shadow self, an illusory self, is that if you look at it long enough, you start to believe it's the real thing, right? And so if I show you all the highlights of my life, all my achievements, all my shadows, the person that I probably deceive the most is myself. And now I'm living my life differently, right? I'm living my life differently if I have to report to you, my audience, my friend, my peer on social media or whatever, once a day or once a week. I've got to show you the highlights. It affects the way that I live my life instead of...
Yeah, you're living like a false pretense.
Yeah. Instead of thinking, that everything I do matters, now I'm thinking about the only things that people see me do matter. And I do believe that comparison is a losing game, no matter what, right? And that at the end of the day, my job is to run my own race, do my own thing, live my own life. And you've got your own race to run, right? And so I remember a friend of mine who is a pretty famous public speaker wrote this book and was like very, very scrutinized and criticized for it and just kind of outcast by a particular group of people. And it seemed to be the end of his career, and it actually opened up another door for a whole new set of possibilities. But for a couple of years, things were looking pretty bleak there. And I asked him, I said, do you regret doing that? And was that hard when everybody sort of kicked you out of this one group and said you weren't, you didn't belong anymore? Because it was over for him, right? And it just so happened that it led to a much bigger, broader way of being. And he said, no, that was hard, but I never regretted doing that because, when they said when they kind of kicked me out and said I didn't belong anymore, he said they misunderstand what I was doing all along, right? They said I was playing, bad tennis. And I'm over here playing golf, right? I'm playing baseball. I'm playing a whole different game. And this is what we do, right? We go, look at this person with their Tesla. I love, their life must be really good. I'd love to have their life. And it's like looking at somebody playing tennis and trying to figure out they're the best tennis player I've ever seen. I'm going to apply this over to this game of golf that I'm playing. It just doesn't work. There are probably some principles that you can glean, right? But we got to be very careful with all this, what's your morning routine or the 5 things that billionaires do before breakfast. And it's like, okay, fine. But we have to consider things like survivorship bias, right? Just because you made it through doesn't mean, just because you ate an apple a day every day and you survived cancer doesn't mean the apple had anything to do with you surviving cancer, right? Just because you get up before 5 o'clock in the morning every day doesn't mean that's why you're a billionaire. It could, but we don't know. And so I think we can be students and pay attention to other people's lives and work while understanding that there is a translation process where I translate what works for you to what works for me. And as somebody who speaks another language, okay, One of the things we learned when when I was studying Spanish in college, living in Spain, was all translation is interpretation. All translation is interpretation. And there are words in Spanish that don't translate to English, right? And there are words in Arabic that don't translate to Spanish. And there are entire concepts in, Chinese that we don't even have frameworks for, in a Western culture. And so we just have to understand that what worked for you in your particular context, even in LA versus Nashville, different cultures, different norms, different ideas, different ways of being. And again, I can go, that's very interesting. I love paying attention to other people's stories. I love reading biographies, but understand you're looking at somebody's shadow, right? And that what worked for you will not necessarily work for me, because you've got your race and I've got mine.
Yeah. Very, very wise words. One thing I do when I'm looking at what somebody is up to and looking at the shadows of the Teslas and all that sort of stuff, I'm reminding myself that there's a bigger picture here, that there is that behind the scenes, and there's everything else that's connected to that. And I don't want that person's Tesla. I don't want that person's private jet or whatever, because I don't want everything that goes with it, right? I can't just, and I don't want to just swap lives with this person. And that's what people tend to do, is they tend to just compartmentalize and say, well, I want that one piece of their life, and that one piece is going to be awesome if I have it. But
right.
What about the fact that they battled some terrible disease that almost killed them? And like, you don't want to switch places with them, but you got to remember that you don't want to switch places with them, and not just focus on that one thing that you want that they have.
Yeah. It's a whole package. You don't get one thing without everything else.
Yeah. So I'm curious if we could circle back to, you had mentioned briefly that you had struggled with your weight in your younger years, and you were bullied and really badly treated. How has that impacted who you are today, and how you show up in the world, and what you write?
Yeah, well, it's given me empathy for sure. And it's helped me understand that you really are the sum of your conscious thoughts, right? So this idea that we become what we think about, right? That's the Earl Nightingale strangest secret. What does Napoleon Hill say? Thoughts are things. As a man thinketh, so is he. I mean, there's all this wisdom, literature, and ideas about what we think about ourselves really does affect our reality. So here I am, as a shy, overweight teenager who's getting bullied quite a bit, can't get a girlfriend, came to puberty late, had long hair. It was the 90s, into grunge music, wearing flannels. Fat, and often mistaken for a girl, because I haven't really, matured into the body of a man, and I'm kind of chubby, and I've got long hair, and it's hard to tell. Really difficult, really hard, and affected my confidence. And so, what's really funny is junior year of high school, a number of things happen. One, the most popular kid in my class, and arguably one of the most popular kids in our small school in rural northern Illinois, he dies. He collapses on the gym floor and he dies very quickly, suddenly, and tragically. Heart failure, of all things. And it totally rocks the school. None of us have ever known a kid to die, especially our age. And for me, it sort of wakes me up. I mean, here's this kind of untouchable kid whose parents are wealthy, and he's very popular. He has it all, and I have none of that. I'm not coming from money, not popular, not cool. Girls don't like me. Things aren't going well for me, and he's gone. And it just, something about it, it's sort of this ecclesiastical kind of moment where I realize, this is all meaningless, and all that matters is what's here right now. I better make something of this. So I start running, and I start I'm this very shy, overweight kid who doesn't really have any friends, and I start becoming very social and inviting these groups of people out to bowling. We all go bowling and hang out, and I become kind of the leader of this social group for my junior and senior year of high school. And it completely catalyzes this change in my life. And I get into pretty good shape. I lose a bunch of weight. I get a girlfriend, so I've now achieved the thing that I set out to do. And what's funny is for years, I still think of myself as that chubby, outcast kid. And I remember a series of moments that happened in senior year. One was I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time and like thinking that I was sort of overweight. She's like, "You're not overweight." And I remember looking back at the pictures, like I'm a beanpole. I weighed like 140 pounds or something then, like I'm a skinny, kid. And then the other thing that happened was one Friday afternoon, I got a call from some person that I don't know who's a classmate. And they go, "What are we going to do tonight?" And I said, "How should I know?" They're like, "Well, you're the guy." And I'm like, "I'm a guy? I'm not a guy." They're like, "You're the guy who decides what we're going to do." And so it taught me something about leadership and going first. And that leading is really just being brave enough to say, "Okay, let's go." It's not knowing the answers or even knowing what you're supposed to do. It's just being willing to say, "Let's go that way." I was at a conference not too long ago, and we went out, a group of people went out to a bar afterwards. And we all like walked into the bar and didn't know what to do. We just kind of froze for some reason. We just stood there and kind of talked about, nobody would order a drink, nobody would do anything. And my one friend was like, "Forget you guys." And he just walked away and started playing darts by himself, right? And then a couple people went over there, and I went over, I go, "Hey, is everything all right?" He goes, "Yeah, everything's all right, but I'm not going to do this thing anymore. We just kind of show up and don't know what to do. I'm just going to go do, whatever it is I want to do." And that's leadership, is just going, "Let's go, let's go." So I find that I keep having to learn that lesson over and over again, that if I just sort of get over myself and see an opportunity and say, "Hey, let's do something about this," people follow. So how that has translated into the work that I do today, it's as simple as me feeling like not good enough to be a writer, not good enough to share my work with the world, and then just doing it, and not only doing it, but encouraging other people to do it. And I find it, especially in the creative work that I do, working with writers, artists, creative entrepreneurs, people who make things and want to share them with the world, the number one question is a question of worthiness. Do I deserve to be here? Am I good enough? Can I share this thing with the world and people care about it? So shame, because I still hear, what's interesting is, the weight thing is funny because it's a trigger for me, and I've gained weight, lost weight, and done all of that, and kind of just come to the point where I'm healthy and happy with who I am, and it's going to fluctuate. But right now, like I'm a few more pounds than I would like to be, and I can sort of feel it, and I can still, it's very easy for me to still hear those voices of shame. The bullies are gone, right? They've moved on. I can still hear their voices, right? And I can listen to them and even think it's my voice, right? And it just requires a little bit of mindfulness, just a little bit of awareness to go, I don't have to listen to that. I don't have to pay attention to that. So I think it gives me great empathy for people who struggle with questions of feeling not good enough, because I totally get that. And it has also taught me that you can do great things while still feeling incomplete, while still feeling like you're working through something. And why would anybody like this? And who even cares? And are you good enough to do that? Okay, fine. These are voices that I take along with me on the journey towards greatness, whatever that might look like.
Yeah. So would you say that you don't even need to address or solve this problem of feeling worthy? You can just get on with your life and do it anyways, act as if? Or is it really best to address that worthiness issue, get past that, feel like you deserve to have a blessed and abundant life, and then just the floodgates are opened?
If I may have my cake and eat it too, I would say both. Right. I do think there are people who go to seminar after seminar and Tony Robbins their eyes out, and they're trying to fix this problem. Yeah. They're trying to fix the problem, which is the whole problem, which is when I feel worthy, then I will do X. Now, that very statement is a statement of shame and unworthiness. Because what they're saying is, I'm not good enough. It's a very meta thing. I'm not good enough to go get on with my work because I'm still dealing with this question of shame. I would say the way in which we deal with any core issue in our life is to get on with it, but not repress it, not push it away, not ignore it, but understand it as a presence in my life that I continue to work through and address. And if you study anything about trauma, and all shame is connected to some sort of even mild trauma, I mean, that stuff stays with you, right? It's not a demon that necessarily gets exorcised overnight. And in some cases, trauma lives in your body at a cellular level. I do like what Anthony DeMello, an old priest and psychotherapist from the 70s, great teacher, says about this sort of thing. He says, what you are aware of, you are in control of. And what you are unaware of is in control of you. So what you're aware of, you're in control of. What you're unaware of is in control of you. So if you've got deep shame issues and you're refusing to look at those, that's going to drive you in very unhealthy and unsustainable ways. So I think the work is to constantly be aware of, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel unworthy? Where does that come from? And how do I get on with it? How do I keep moving? And I'm a fan of retreats and seminars, and go off on a mountaintop and go into your prayer closet. Do that work and keep doing the work that you're here to do. And it seems to me that it happens in waves, in fluctuations, right? But I would never tell somebody, go get worthy, and then you can share your work with the world, because there's something really powerful, about, say, a Brene Brown who's talking about shame while sort of experiencing it and not dwelling in it and not just trying to, exercise it in a weekend, but going, hey, this is part of the human condition, a big part of our culture. So let's be aware of it and work through it together. And I do think, honestly, the awareness is the work. If you continue to be aware of something, even something like, I feel sort of chubby right now, and that's uncomfortable, just being aware of that, not sucking it in, right? Not pretending it's not there, but just going, this is kind of uncomfortable for me. I guess I should do something about that. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just awareness.
Yeah. Awareness is more than half the battle, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of TRE, trauma releasing exercises?
I have. I've not done anything like that, but I've heard about some of that. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. So I actually just had Dr. David Berselli on this show talking about TRE. So he's the founder of TRE. And
it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is fascinating to think that you can release trauma that's in your body that you may not even have any memory of anymore. Like he was talking about soldiers, veterans who had memory loss, so they didn't even recall the trauma, but it was in their body and it got released by doing this exercise of shaking, as if you are experiencing the after effect of trauma, just like an animal gets hit by a car and then it tries to shake it off. You do this exercise and it can shed that trauma. It's amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of amazing things that are happening today, for sure.
Yeah. Now let's get back to writing and to
sure.
this gift of conveying a powerful message that you have, and so many of us also have. Like the power of storytelling is within many of us, if not all of us, right? And the old adage that facts tell, stories sell. It's important to convey any kind of message or influence around your product or service or anything, really. So one thing that you had mentioned is that you started writing every day and posting every day. That reminds me of Seth Godin, who I also interviewed, and he talked about how he would blog every single day without fail. And what was it about that? Was it some sort of cathartic release? Was it just the habit? Was it that you knew that you were revealing light out there in the world, and you're doing that every day, and that kind of helped build up your worthiness. Like, what was it about that thing of putting quote unquote pen to paper every single day that was the magic for you?
It was the act of doing it. It was the act of calling my bluff. I did it for myself. I didn't do it for anyone. I didn't do it initially to build an audience. I did it because I had said for so long that I wanted to do it, and I didn't do it. And once I started calling myself a writer, I felt forced to do it. And so I think looking back on that, I was trying to keep a promise to myself. And I do think that you have to keep the promises to yourself before you can ever hope of keeping a promise to another person.
Yeah.
Right? That is true integrity. Integrity means wholeness. To be integrated is to be whole. And if you become disintegrated, if you lose your integrity, disintegrated, you're falling apart, right? So for me, it was just about keeping a promise to myself and developing a habit. And I loved it. It was fun. And so the only metric early on was, can I show up and do this? Right? And if I can, who knows what else can happen? But I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of wishing about it. I'm tired of complaining about not doing it. What if I just tried to do it? Maybe that would be enough. And it became fun. And eventually people started paying attention, and all this other stuff started happening. But early on, it was practice. And I agree with Seth. He says, write like you talk, which is often and in public. Practice in public. It is the best way to get better faster.
Yeah, that's great. And then practice also, there's this expression that practice makes perfect. But then I learned from Tony Robbins, because I took a lot of his seminars. I am a seminar junkie. Practice makes permanent. So if you have some quirk about your writing or your speaking or whatever it is, it doesn't mean it's going to go away just because you're continually hammering at the thing day after day. It may actually make it more embedded into your practice, into your art. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole study of deliberate practice is a really important one. If you've never read the book Peak, highly recommend it. But what is this saying? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And it's true that you can practice things the wrong way, and now it's cemented in your brain. And that's why deliberate practice, peak performance, requires a coach, some sort of teacher. And so you want to be doing your work, right? And then at some point you want to be sharing it and then getting feedback from qualified leaders, coaches, professionals, whatever, if you want to be great at it. There's plenty of things that I don't care to be great at. Like, I love cooking. I'm pretty good at it. I don't need, Emerald or somebody in my kitchen telling me what I'm doing wrong. I don't care. Like, it's not that big of a deal to me. But if you want to be great at it, you do need a teacher. You do need a guide. Lots of people, including Tony, sort of poo-poo the term guru. But I love the original meaning and etymology of that word, guru, which apparently is two Hindi words, which means no darkness. Guru, no darkness, no dark. And so the job of a guru is not to tell you what the way is, but to tell you all the false paths, to reveal the ways in which you're doing it wrong. And I like the idea that nobody can tell you what your art is. Nobody can tell you what your calling is. At best, they can help you figure out, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Oh, maybe it's this, right? And what's left, I mean, this again is sort of a mystical idea. What's left is sort of the one true way, which cannot be named. And that's your path. Even as in terms of vocation, the thing that you're here to do is this mysterious, flow that you find yourself in. But yeah, totally. I mean, there's lots of people who are practicing writing, and they're writing terrible book after terrible book after terrible book. And you can practice writing badly, and now you're really good at writing badly, And so I do think having a teacher, having a guide, a guru, somebody who can reveal all the ways in which you're doing it wrong is really helpful. And it's actually very uncommon, very rare these days to have a true teacher, right? You think back to the Renaissance, a time of true mastery, right? And I think that's something that we have a dearth of today in our society, true excellence and craftsmanship. We live in this disposable society where everything you can throw away pretty easily.
Even
and so
planned
it just
obsolescence. It's crazy. Like,
yeah, it's planned obsolescence. Yeah, like let's throw away these crappy headphones, when they break or whatever. Let's throw away the IKEA couch when it naturally falls apart 5 years from now,
the
and it's
iPhone
fine.
is 2 years old, and my goodness, we need to get a new one.
Yeah, I spent, I got to, I only spent $1,000 on this 2 years ago. It's a piece of junk now. Yeah, instead of creating and consuming things that last your life. I'm going to buy a coat and it's going to fit me forever and I'm going to wear it for the next 25 years. It's not part of our culture. And so I think that we live in a society where everybody wants to be a master, but nobody's willing to be an apprentice. And really, apprenticeship was a 10-year process. And 7 of those years is just doing whatever the master said to do. You're just helping him shine. You're helping the master artist or artisan do their work better. And in humbling yourself and doing that, you begin to learn a lot about the art form. And I think that it's not enough to practice. If I want to be great at what you do, I've got to watch you work. I've got to see you make the choices that you make and pay attention to it. And there are some societies that still do this, but most do not. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would do is I'd go to all these different seminars. Tony Robbins was one of them, but and I was platinum partner with him, so I would do like these extra like exotic trips to India and Cabo and Fiji. It was great. Cool. It was definitely life changing, and that's how I met my wife too. Was through one of those events, and so much of what you learn you don't implement. So what would people would do is they would go to like all the events they could possibly fit into their schedule. They'd spend maybe even a third of their entire year on the road as a platinum partner, going to his public events and then going to the platinum events. It's crazy. And then, okay, I need to take a year off or 2 or 3, or I'm maybe never coming back because I've got to implement. That I kept hearing that over and over and over again. And I did 3 years in a row. And there's probably 90% of what I learned I didn't implement. And it's just how do you find the time to implement everything? So I'm this lifelong learner. It's even in my top 5 strengths and Strengths Finder is learner. And what I found I was doing was I was chasing after the tree of knowledge. Instead, this is the first line in the Anabacoa prayer, which is a Kabbalistic prayer that I do every morning. The first line is about just letting go of the tree of knowledge and all of the good and evil that's in the tree of knowledge, and just connecting with the tree of life and the miracles of the tree of life. And so I'm working really hard to just kind of let go of that incessant drive to learn new things and just be more and connect and tap into that fabric of creation. That's been a challenge for me, but it's also been it's like a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders.
I love that. Yeah, right. I love tree of knowledge versus tree of life. And the Christian Bible, there's the Bible, the book, the 66 books in the Bible are bookended with Genesis and Revelation, right? Genesis is the beginning, Revelation is the end, so to speak. And in Genesis, you've got Garden of Eden. There's 2 main trees that it talks about: tree of knowledge, of good and evil, and tree of life. And when you get to Revelation, there's only one tree, and it's the tree of life. And everything is flowing from that. And it's like, so the implication, as you're implying here, is when we bow down to knowledge and trying to figure everything out, instead of living from our source, from who we are, from the light that refracts into, through the prism. When we try to figure it out, when we're chasing the shadows, even chasing the shadow of being good enough, right? We're not figuring it out, right? And instead of chasing the source, which is to live fully. The glory of God is man fully alive. And that is a whole thing, isn't it? We want to spend all this time trying to figure it out instead of learning to trust ourselves and that maybe there's something good and true inside of us that we can start listening to.
Yeah. What a great way to end this episode. So, of course, we want to send our listener to learn more from you and maybe even get mentorship from you, because that is another level where you're actually more just being and not so much doing or just absorbing information, which is good too. I mean, there's a place for going to a seminar or a workshop or an online course of yours and learning the craft, learning how to be better at what you maybe might already be your unique ability. And there's something extra special in going through that mentorship process too. So I don't know if you offer anything like that.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we do. The main thing that I'm focusing on these days, I taught a lot of online courses over the years. I still do some of that, but same thing that you've experienced, which is that just because you gain knowledge about a topic doesn't mean you're necessarily applying it. Just because you get information doesn't necessarily mean that it leads to transformation. So these days I'm running a series of coaching groups and masterminds for writers and creative entrepreneurs, and we're going through a 6 to 12 month process depending on what it is and what people want to do. Yeah, so I've got a mastermind for creative entrepreneurs and a coaching group for writers who want to figure out the process of actually writing and launching a book. So you can find out about all of that at my website at goinswriter.com. I typically don't publicly sell things until people get on my email list. We get to know them, get to know them a little while. And if people want to come buy something, they can. But really, I don't want anybody to buy anything from me until they feel like they trust me and we've got some sort of relationship. Because I've got plenty of blog posts and podcasts. And if that can help somebody, great, start there. And if a program or event is something that you need, then we can talk about that as well. So thank you, Stephan, for that. And people can find me at my website, which is just my last name, Goins Writer, Goins writer.com. Or, back in high school when I was being made fun of, like groins, but without the R, goinswriter.com.
Oh my goodness.
So now you won't be able to forget it. So now I can redeem my childhood shame for profit.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you, listener. I hope you now take some of this and apply it in your life and get out there and reveal some light. This is your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.